to another episode of the Coffee, Commerce, and Catechesis podcast. Join us on our journey to learn more about the Christian faith and how we can live it out in our modern world. When it comes to technology, research, and innovation, there are a lot of talented people out there. But over time, we've become so obsessed with what's possible, we've forgotten to fall back on ethics. We have Jeff Kleck with us today to discuss post-secondary education grounded in faith. Travis, over to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Rigel, and thank you everyone for tuning in to another episode of Coffee, Commerce, and Catechesis. We are chatting today about forming saints, scholars, and scientists. And more specifically, we're going to be chatting about a new university that is striving to do exactly that. So by way of introduction here, we're going to start with a quote as always. And in early 2024, Pope Francis said to a delegate from the International Federation of Catholic Universities, "I ask you to help the Church at this moment in her history to shed light on the deepest human aspirations by offering insight and understanding, as well as the reasons of hope born of faith, and thus assisting the Church to engage confidently in dialogue on the great issues of our time." So I think that's a great background for the conversation we're going to be having about a university that is going to be striving to do exactly that. And to have this conversation, we are joined by Dr. Jeff Kleck. And Dr. Jeff Kleck is a leader in the fields of software, information technology, medical technology, nuclear technologies, defense technologies, and advanced technologies. He is also an expert in new venture creation and entrepreneurship, and an established Silicon Valley technology entrepreneur, having built several successful ventures, serving as founder, CEO, and chairman, including taking them public on the NASDAQ and combining them into larger companies. He holds both a Bachelor of Science and a Master of Science in Nuclear Engineering from Texas A&M University, a PhD in Biomedical Physics from UCLA, and a Master of Science in Engineering Management from Stanford University. He is a senior advisor with the United States Department of Defense, an adjunct professor at Stanford University, and the Dean of Academics and the Chairman of Entrepreneurship and Technology Commercialization with the Catholic Institute of Technology. So Dr. Kleck, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me here.
Dr. Jeff, I have to kick things off with the bio that Travis just read.
It seems long, doesn't it?
Not only that, it is humbling to listen to. It's almost mind-boggling. By any measure of our secular world today, you have achieved success in essentially every area of your life. You've done the academia thing, you've done the private thing, you're now an advisor for the Department of Defense. What is it that draws you to an initiative, and what made you want to join the Catholic Institute of Technology?
Well, first of all, what a compelling proposition, right? I certainly don't have to explain it to you, and probably all the other Catholics. Every Catholic I speak to, they get it immediately. It's like, I don't have to defend it. I don't have to explain it. They just say, "This is long overdue. Thank you." Right? That's usually what comes out of their mouths immediately. So, and I agree. When I saw it first, I thought, this is so simple. All the best ideas are simple. This makes so much sense. Why haven't we done this before? Let's do it now. I think that, and then when I saw the people that were participating, that were pulling this together, those that found it, and then those that, of course, found the founders and volunteered their help, I realized, this was going to be a great endeavor. How could it not be? All these pieces were right. Finding a STEM university and bringing it back to, the Catholic community, allowing, folks in the community to have a resource to better teach their children. I mean, that's certainly what all of us want as parents. And, those of us who are curious scientists and engineers, I mean, we can't ask for, and Catholics as well, what more could you ask for than have that learning experience, in Castol Gandolfo, in the shadow of, the Papal Gardens, the Vatican Observatory, the Papal Palace. I mean, that's pretty hard to beat.
I got back from Rome about 2 months ago. I was in Italy with my wife. We had literally, my story, people who listen to podcasts will know my story. We got confirmed in the Catholic Church, and then the next day we're on a plane to Rome, and we're in Italy for a month. And it's a place that's near and dear to my heart. the prospect of studying in Rome is maybe the coolest thing I can imagine. And so, I'm envious that I'm not in need of more education at this point in my life, just because it looks so cool. But Jeff, can you maybe, for those who don't know anything, who have never heard about the Catholic Institute of Technology, and this is their first exposure to it, can you give us kind of a crash course in what is CatholicTech, why is it being started, and how do people learn more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's probably good to start with the founders. The founders are folks from Boston, husband and wife, Bill and Alexis Haughey. Alexis is at MIT. From MIT, as many of the faculty are. So we have a lot of faculty from that community. I'm, of course, all the way across the country from Stanford and Silicon Valley. And then I guess the best way to explain it is, these folks, the Haughey's, realize, and they're, steeped in, Catholic tradition and the Catholic faith, and of course, scientists and engineers both. They realized what a gift it would be if they could build a university, a STEM university, that was, as they were touring around Italy themselves and came upon Castol Gandolfo, and they realized, what a gift it would be if they could build a university there for STEM. Now, we probably, at least maybe I'm biased, but I can't imagine in my lifetime we will ever have enough scientists, technologists, and engineers. The demand only grows for them, right? And it's not necessarily where, we always hear that we're not producing to fulfill that demand. So, they're certainly, their minds were in the right place in terms of, the opportunity to build more STEM educated folks. And I think their hearts were in the right place, and making sure that that was a Catholic university that had their doors open to allow people to be educated in a Catholic environment. And this was, now 2 or 3 years ago that they came to this. And so then, this has been in the works. Like I said, once they realized, they were at Castol Gandolfo, they came across the facility, which is now CatholicTech, and they realized it would be perfect, for the university. I think they were absolutely right. The grounds are beautiful. It's a estate several hundred years old, built by the Orsinis, which was a prominent family of Italy and Rome, and has been used by the Catholic Church for some time, and it is now CatholicTech. So CatholicTech is a U.S.-based university. So people immediately think, oh, well, CatholicTech is in Castol Gandolfo, right next to the Papal Palace. Of course, it's in Italy, so it's an Italian university. No, this is a U.S. university built in Castol Gandolfo. And the headquarters are in Cambridge. So it's a U.S. university with its first campus in Italy.
Now, Jeff, you mentioned that, when you talk to other Catholics, you never have to defend this idea or explain it to them. It just makes sense. Keeping in mind that we have non-Catholic and even non-Christian listeners, can you maybe explain what the need was that CatholicTech is addressing in terms of, like those people might look at faith and science and see them as two completely disconnected things. So the idea of bringing them together might just seem very foreign to them. Can you tell us a little bit more about the motivation there?
Sure. And, we often hear, folks talk about, these two things as separate. And I always try to bring people, kind of up back to 50,000 feet. It's always a great phrase. What does it mean? But in this case, both of these are experiences, adventures, maybe even, that are a search for truth. So if, Linus Pauling said it well, science is a search for truth. I think those of us, in the faith believe our faith is, our search for truth and our belief in truth. So kind of the fundamentals of both of these are the exact same thing. So why should they conflict, right? They don't conflict. And in fact, science, if we follow the scientific method, we're constantly testing, we're looking at the problems, we're creating hypotheses, we're testing those hypotheses, and we're refining them. Well, what do we do throughout our lives as, people of faith? We're essentially doing the same thing, right? On a daily basis. So, I believe Catholics, really, and, folks of faith have, pretty much a scientific method ingrained in them. So it just makes sense to me that they would have a university that would have both together. And, some people believe there's a conflict. I don't believe there's any conflict at all. I'm a little, sometimes I worry about the folks that think there's a conflict, and I wonder what they're believing in if they're not so confident in their beliefs that they can test their beliefs, right?
It's interesting that you're highlighting there this perceived conflict between religious beliefs and science. And I will point a big finger at myself as being one of the people that believed these two things were almost from different worlds. And you either had to believe in science and the pursuit of truth in science, or you could be religious, but you couldn't be both at the same time. And looking back now, I think for me, and now having investigated it a ton, and the history of where this idea of conflict between religious belief and science came from, it's rooted in, actually in many respects, in anti-Catholicism. It stems from a lot of work that was done by fundamentalist and then evangelical Christians that were trying to poke holes in the Catholic faith. I grew up in an evangelical household, very much steeped, without even knowing it, steeped in this idea that you had to believe that the Bible says that creation could only be 6,000 years old or 6,500. I forget the actual number. And thus you couldn't believe in science because science is telling us the universe is billions of years old, and you had to pick one or the other. And that, unfortunately, it was one of the steps that led me to leave my Christian faith entirely for, almost 20 years. And that's sad now, because now that I've researched and come to learn the rich history of science complementing and being supported by the church, we have universities today because the church sponsored and supported academic institutions. The first universities, my brother just finished his PhD at the University of Oxford, the first university in the English-speaking world, was meant to teach theology and philosophy. That is what it was for. And so the idea that science and religion are in conflict is almost laughable when you look into the history of it. And yet the common narrative seems to be, at least in the English-speaking world, very much today still, that religion and science are in conflict. You're a Catholic, and you've been a scientist for seemingly decades at an extremely high level, working and teaching in secular universities. Did you ever personally have a struggle between this idea that there's a conflict between your faith and your professional pursuits, academic pursuits? And if not, how do you explain this to people that think there's some conflict?
No, but I think what's required is, you have to have an open mind, first of all. If you anchor your faith to some fundamental belief that is, capricious or arbitrary, or, is shared with you by someone and that you just decide is in concrete, and are unwilling to test that, I can understand how, you would get to that point of then having, to push science aside, right? Because, like I said, if you follow the scientific method, you're always questioning, and we're always improving. I mean, look what, during Galileo's time, look what we were able to do in terms of looking at, the planets and the stars. And now between the Hubble and the Webb telescope, look what we're able to do. I mean, there's been this progression. So I think it's very unfortunate for folks to anchor their beliefs in something that is rigid. Now, we know the universe, there's a lot of truths out in the universe, that it is really it is truth, right? There's, now we can't expect that we know it all. So how can we develop the conclusion of what the universe must be, which sometimes we see in religion, without the ability to see it? If you look back a few hundred years ago, there were certainly things that we could not see in the universe that we can better see now. And we certainly understand, from history, folks that set their foot and said, well, the universe is this way. And they did it based on what they just knew at that time. And of course, they were proven wrong. So I think it's very dangerous to go to believe everything is fixed and that you know everything at a point in time, instead of having an open mind. And I think I was very fortunate to get back to your question, Travis. I think I was very fortunate, and then I had a natural curiosity. So I was always willing to question things, and I certainly have always taught my students that to question everything, question me. Just because I say something doesn't mean it's correct. I may believe it, but you may end up with more data than me and better data, and you come to a better answer. You can educate me. So I think that's an important way to look at both science and religion.
And one thing I just want to comment on, and then I'll pass over to Rigel for a question. But I was shocked when I learned that the Big Bang Theory was first proposed by a Catholic priest who was also a scientist. But when I first encountered that, I had just believed that the Big Bang Theory was a harsh threat against the religious convictions that I had when I was younger, and that it somehow then, when I became a practical atheist, that it was largely because of things like the Big Bang Theory disproved what I'd been led to believe. And then when I found out that a Catholic priest is the one proposing this, that just blew my mind. And it wasn't until I found the Catholic Church probably a decade or more later and started digging into the Catholic tradition, I started realizing that science and the Catholic faith are so integrated and ingrained, because what underlies both of them is this pursuit of the truth. And there's something about that was one of the biggest reasons for me in my conversion back to the Christian faith first, and then specifically to the Catholic Church, is the seeking for truth. And that's very, very scientific. And so anyways, kind of an anecdotal story. But Rigel, over to you for a question.
Yeah, I just have to add that there's something really beautiful about pursuing our curiosity in the context of our faith. When you look at the intersect of science and faith, it's almost like you're unraveling or, peeling back the layers of the onion that is God's creation. And each step we take forward is helping us to better understand the world around us. There are points in time where, we don't know what we don't know. Right.
That's
And
right.
so we will always have an understanding of our current situation, but that doesn't say anything about what we will understand in the future. So another thing I want to add, Jeff, because of this idea of science in the context of faith, I've been at university, a secular university, and we've been taught philosophy and ethics. And it feels like we have to be on guard all the time because there are going to be teachers that are, to be charitable, subpar compared to what my standard of a teacher should be. So, like you said, question me. There are some teachers out there who want their word to be gospel, and they preached about things that they don't really understand themselves. So I want to tie this back to CatholicTech. What can students expect from their teachers? How does their faith integrate with the student experience at CatholicTech?
Yeah, sure. So certainly in terms of expectation from their teachers, I'm one of those professors, and I'm the dean of academics there. And I just shared my philosophy in terms of, everything should be questioned, right? The base of our faculty, most of our faculty are from MIT and Stanford. Well, those are the number one and number two STEM universities in the United States, and probably, arguably, certainly in the top STEM universities in the world. So we have very good faculty to start with. And then we have, like I said, a philosophy that, our students, I want our students to be better than us. If we start good, we're scientists, engineers, philosophers, theologians. If you look at the coursework at CatholicTech, it's everything from engineering and science on one side. I hate putting them on one side and then what's on the other, because it seems like we're dividing them. And in some ways we are, because those of us who are scientists and engineers are specialists and experts in certain fields under that banner. And then we have, theologians and philosophers, ethicists, many of which are coming from the Vatican and the universities there that are teaching at CatholicTech now, and they are experts in their field. Now we're putting those together in the students that we're educating, and we're expecting those students to be not just one or the other, but that merger of both of those educations. So I'm expecting the students to become the teachers at the end of this, because they will be more suited than us to be both philosopher and scientist, right? And that is very different. I think that's a new approach, and it will be a new generation to those that come out and lead us, right? And I think that's what we want. I mean, I know that's what I want. I want scientists and engineers that are all also, ethically grounded through education of philosophy and theology.
That's awesome. What I'd love to learn a little more about is the structure. You said it's an American university that happens to be geographically based in Italy, but it is an American university, and every country has its own nuances in terms of university education. So, big example: Rigel did his first undergraduate degree in the UK. I did my MBA in the UK, but we're both Canadians. He did his second bachelor's degree in Canada. I did my first undergraduate degree here in Canada. So, Canada's undergraduate system is very similar to the US's, although there tends to be a little more flexibility in terms of course choices in the four-year degree. British undergraduate programs have almost no flexibility at all, but they're only 3 years long. So you have one less year of study, but there's not this idea of options classes or whatever really isn't part of the deal. You get in, you get out quick, but you had a lot less flexibility built into the program. What does the general structure of the programs offered at CatholicTech look like?
So certainly, there are STEM degrees. So there's biological sciences, and this is a very technology-based biological sciences degree. The same basic base technology education, in math and sciences that you would have for the engineers, you would have for the biology majors, and then there's civil engineering. There's biomedical engineering. There's mechanical engineering, there's electrical engineering, computer science, and this is our starting point. These are, if from an engineering perspective, these are some of the kind of fundamental building block engineering fields, right? And the so the students, are able to specialize in any of the degrees I just mentioned. At the same time, then they're all getting steeped in the education in philosophy, theology, ethics. I think of ethics as, it's if you take philosophy and theology and put together and say, okay, how do we apply this in the real world, as a professional engineer, that's really ethics, right? So a lot of what we're creating are these applied scientists, which is what an engineer is. And that's really what ethics is. It's the application of philosophy and theology. So at the end of this, what we expect to have is a very application oriented, graduate. that understands how to apply what they've learned in building things, in constructing things, in searching, searching as a researcher for truth. So also in there, like you said, we're a U.S. university, but we're in Italy, right? And they're also taking Italian. And then, they're, of course, living in Italy. We want them to learn Italian. In fact, their environment around them is, Italy. How could you not learn Italian? So we want to make sure that they all have the ability to do that because, for 1.7 billion Catholics, Rome is home, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why would we not, if we had the opportunity, extend that opportunity to these folks that mostly speak English to also speak in the language, the tongue of their homeland. I think it's a good thing to do.
Oh, well, Jeff, I have to say, you pointed out something that brings me a great deal of shame. Um, talking about living in Italy and how can you not learn Italian? Well, I happen to live in Thailand for 14 years and I didn't properly learn the language. So, yeah, that's still a sore point for me.
I'm there with you. I lived in Italy for 2 years while I was young, and my Italian can absolutely be improved, right? So that's okay. That's okay. This is given the opportunity, I like the opportunity of improving this for myself as well.
For sure. Jeff, I actually do want to follow up with one challenge almost. Travis and I live in Calgary. We have a Catholic school board here, and over time, it's changed a little bit in the nature of what it is. Can you tell us a little bit more about what students can expect from Catholic Tech, come September, but also like 5 to 10 years from now, like capital matters. How do we ensure that this Catholic institution stays Catholic? Are the teachers well formed? Are the other students going to be Catholic? What is going to form their experience of their faith while they are at Catholic Tech?
So it is a Catholic university and a Catholic environment. No question. Will every single student be Catholic? Well, when we first started, the expectation was that over 90% of the student body would be Catholic, and that's really, that's coming to fruition because it looks like a lot of the students we have coming from the U.S. are coming from Catholic high schools, right? Although that's not everyone. And I don't think we want to say it's going to be only this or only, a certain way. We want it open. We want it truly a Catholic experience. And that means maybe not every single person who ends up there is Catholic, but, why would they go there otherwise unless they were searching for a Catholic experience, right? So they will be Catholics and those folks interested in searching for a Catholic experience. I think is the best way to describe the students. How do you describe this in terms of immediately? Well, I can tell you, you can imagine all the things that need to be done to open the doors of a university and the urgency around making sure that all these resources are available for the students. That's happening right now, right? we're 2 months away from opening. And what will it look like in 5 years? Well, hopefully it'll look a lot different than that, sense of urgency. Maybe not, right? Maybe we always want it to be somewhat urgent to keep improving the university. But we have started, small, even though this is a very big idea. Everything's got to start somewhere. So the university will grow. The good news is we have a lot of great supporters, and everyone wants us to grow. I was so surprised when I went there in March, and the faculty and the administration came to the campus in March, to talk about what we were going to do to open the doors and, how was this all going to work. And I was just amazed. I thought, with time and as we took care of things, then we would start reaching out to the community. that didn't need to happen at all. The community had already reached out to us. We were essentially pulled around Rome to every university you can imagine, speaking to, administrators of all these other universities, who were so curious as to what we were doing, how we were doing it, why we were doing it, welcoming us there. It was amazing. And, not only the universities, but other institutions in Italy, including the financial institutions, who were so much interested in, what could we do to help, improve the economy of Italy and retain these brilliant minds that often in Italy leave and go other places. And so they wanted to know from us, because of course, here we walk in and we're from Silicon Valley, some of us from Boston, and the Silicon East there. And they want to understand, how does that work? And how do we make it work here? And are you bringing it with you? So, yes, we're this U.S. university, but we've been accepted with open arms from, the Italian universities and the other organizations in Italy. And they're curious about, us playing this role between, both parts of the world. So, who could ask for more than that? And I was so surprised, but how pleasantly surprised I was that this is the environment that we have.
I love the overtly Catholic, and that maybe sounds bad, but I love the overtly, unapologetically Catholic nature of this, because I think we can all look at some of the great universities of the world that at one time would have been unapologetically Catholic and have strayed towards using terminology like inspired by our Catholic traditions or whatever, which doesn't really mean anything. That just says who founded the university, and that's about it. And the number of really truly Catholic universities, at least in Canada and the United States, has dwindled significantly. There's still some for sure, and it's okay if a university is going to be a secular institution. You've been educated at secular universities. I have. Rigel has. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's a different experience. You can also find great Christian communities at secular universities. We see that here in Calgary, but they're small and it's not part of the educational experience. It's just something that people find looking for that. So Rigel and I were both super excited about the fact that CatholicTech is integrating what most people think is secular pursuits, whether it's the study of technology or engineering or anything, with the faith, and not pretending to be doing anything other than that. Do you, at this point, it sounds like the response has been terrific, which makes me feel like people are longing for this. People are looking for this. I also know from having conversations, I teach in 2 universities here in Calgary. Rigel and I have conversations with people that are either studying currently or will be studying in the future. Many of them want to do so in an environment where they don't feel like their faith is going to be under attack for ideological reasons or whatever the case might be. What has your experience been so far? Is there a general consensus that this needs to happen because people feel like it's hard to study subjects and be Catholic at the same time? Or even if that is the case, are you not really hearing that? And people are just longing for the ability to combine secular study with the Catholic faith?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I don't think I've had, the discussion in kind of that level of depth with the students or the parents. What generally comes across just is kind of this immediate joy that it exists, right? So that's the first thing that comes out of the parents or the students. And we don't really deconstruct it. It's like, okay, this is exactly what I want. This is the environment I want to be in. I want to come there. So I just kind of take it as great. We're doing the right thing. What else could we do? I've, even though my degrees are from, secular universities, I also went to St. John's in Minnesota for some time. Texas A&M has an incredible, Catholic community at the university. St. Mary's there. It's just amazing programs for the students. So I think you can find, you always, I always remember a professor saying that regardless of where you go to school, you can find a great education if you're searching for it, right? Likewise, I think the same thing is true for you can find the environment you want if you're searching for it, if you search it out. It's hard to imagine that any large secular university, when 17% of the world is Catholic, aren't going to have some people that share a faith and share common experiences growing up. You'll certainly be able to find them. That being said, I think there's something really lovely about having CatholicTech and having those experiences right there and so close at hand. There's nothing wrong with searching. That's a good experience and probably helps build someone. But, it's just so nice if that's one of the things you don't have to do, because you're at a university that completely understands, how you were raised and what you believe, and it's right there for you in a very positive way, and so yeah. Haven't deconstructed too much, had absolutely wonderful experiences at secular universities and Catholic communities in those universities, and had an absolutely amazing experience at St. John's. If I hadn't decided I was an engineer and they didn't have engineering, I certainly would have stayed there in that environment, because it was just, truly wonderful.
We are having this conversation about 6 weeks or so before the inaugural semester would start at CatholicTech, but we're planning to release the episode right around the time that it is going to be occurring. So I know you have to speak from two different perspectives a little bit. The planning process here, as you guys are racing towards the finish line, which is really just the starting line of the big race, which is now we're open and operating. But what does it look like for you now? This has been in the works for years, and it's getting super close to the first students starting the process. I've never been involved in starting a university. I have no idea what goes into that. What does this look like for you? What are you and the team worried about working on right now to get everything ready for those first students?
Yeah, it's interesting. We're certainly have been spending time for months. So even though our faculty, are very steeped in the subject matter, right? Then how you're going to teach it in this environment. Now you're in a new place, in a new part of the world, with students that have traveled from afar. Things are different, right? So we don't have all those answers until that first day you open up. I think you just have to be nimble and joyous about the opportunity. And I think if you approach it that way, we'll find things that absolutely work wonderfully, and things that we immediately probably want to adjust. But that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's like the beginning of this discussion. You should never set something in cement. If there's some improvement based on iteration and change. And so, we'll certainly approach it with having the infrastructure for these students, knowing what we're going to educate them in, but then also being flexible in terms of how we do it in this new environment. You don't often get a chance to you don't hear about new universities popping up every day, so it's not like there's a playbook that you can find on the internet that says do this, do this, do this, don't do that. Likewise, it's a learning experience for us as well.
We'll be following your journey for sure. We know that the promotional campaign is live and on fire. We're seeing stuff every day on LinkedIn, which is awesome. I'm curious, Jeff, that post-secondary institutions, some of them have specific mandates. There are specific things that they like to focus on. For example, I went to a polytechnic. They prided themselves on making sure that their students are job ready by the time they graduate. Now, you mentioned that the students in CatholicTech will be really well positioned to become teachers by the time they're done with their education. But there's also this Silicon Valley connection. And we happen to hear from another interview of yours that you're trying to bridge the gap between CatholicTech and Silicon Valley. Is there a specific focus on entrepreneurship? Is it more towards academia? Is there anything like that?
Yeah, so interesting. So, I mean, they're certainly going to have the ability to teach us, whether they choose their career to become a teacher or professor. That's something different, right? The they're going to be educated. What I meant there was they're going to be educated in a way and with such combination of skill and expertise that we're going to be able to learn from them, and future generations can learn, from these folks. What we're focusing on, though, CatholicTech, or I should say, focusing, not that's not to mean there's a singular focus, but CatholicTech intends to be an R1 research university. So there's only about 100 R1 research universities in the world. It takes a lot and a certain requirement, and we're building towards that. That was the intent of the founders. It's still the intent of the university to become an R1 research university. So the highest caliber of research university. But absolutely in that mix, we want to expose the students to, these are engineers and applied scientists. The outcome of that is actually applying their knowledge. So where does that happen? Well, a lot of that happens, in the commercial world and in industry as a whole. So, creating the connection to the commercial world, very strong part of our DNA. So besides just being Dean of Academics, I also chairman of entrepreneurship and technology commercialization. And I have, myself, reading through that bio, which made me feel very old. Thank you, Travis. A lot of background in the commercial world. So, we're creating this university with very close ties to the commercial world, because we want those students to see that as they're going through, not just to be, once we show them the door, then they're transitioned to something that they've had no experience with. Although some universities do that, that's not going to be the experience here. In fact, every single term, there's a seminar class, which weekly we bring in, a mechanical engineer, a biomedical engineer, a civil engineer, someone that knows their field very well and can share their experiences with the students. And that's every single week of every term, throughout the year. And then, and so, there is, there's a very tight connection through this experiential learning, through internship and, close ties with the, commercial world. Yeah. Yeah. And when I say the commercial world too, then of course, as a research university, that's going to be there too. A lot of times universities, kind of move one way or another, but, your students, they should have the capability and the ability to work in either of those by the time they're finished, to either work as a researcher or within academics or in a research institute, or as a teacher, a professor within academics, or in the commercial world. And I want our students to have the choice of all of those by the time they get out, not just be built for one of them. That's limiting and may not be ultimately what they discover, what they truly love. And so we want to make sure we give them the best possible chance to pick what they want to do for years to come.
I want to give a plug to a past episode of ours and a future episode, because we're going to have our friend Stephen Umbrello back. And I think it's relevant to the conversation for a number of reasons. For one, he's a technology ethicist. And so we've come back to the topic of ethics a number of times here. He's a technology ethicist. He's also based in Italy. He's at the University of Turin. And so those who are listening, check out our last episode that we did with Stephen. It's called AI versus Human Consciousness. We're going to have him back in the future too. But there's something he said during that episode, which your comments, Jeff, just reminded me of. He said, as a philosopher, as an ethicist, he likes talking to engineers because they actually do stuff. And I think you're highlighting that it's really practical, and so it sounds like the students will have an education that is grounded in doing things in the world, whether they go into academia or otherwise. They will be prepared for that, and very much prepared for going into the world of you use the word commercialization, and I think that's really awesome. Last question I'll ask you, and it's related to what you just sort of explained. I know this is super early. You guys haven't even started your first semester there, but with aspirations of being a top tier research university, does that mean in the plans, whether it's midterm or long term, there's expectations of having master's programs and doctoral programs, or have you guys not been able to get there yet in the planning process?
Oh yeah. So yeah, we absolutely have been thinking of what that's going to look like. Obviously, you have to start somewhere, and usually when you start somewhere, you're starting with freshmen, right? So so we're growing right now the programs that suit the people that we bring in, but as those folks get educated and move up, we'll of course be supporting them with other programs. So a good example of if we're creating ethical scientists and engineers, right? And of course we're educating our scientists and engineering students in philosophy and theology, and as I said, the practical application of those in ethics. Well, we're right now looking at that coursework in terms of how it should be constructed to also lead very closely, maybe even almost immediately, to having a master's in ethics and technology. So you can imagine one of our students coming through, as we work this through. Our goal is to have a student that comes through that is a premier, scientist or engineer, technologist, who also has a graduate level education in ethics. Well, who do you want to build your bridge? I know who I would want to build mine. Right? Or AI for that matter, right? You can imagine. I want ethically trained and essentially validated scientists and engineers building the things in our future. And I think this is one of the things that helps us set the mark of where we need to go to get those products.
Jeff, before we kind of wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like to share that we haven't asked you about? I just want to give you the opportunity to plug the university, maybe share the other information that we haven't had a chance to speak about yet.
Sure. Well, I'll certainly share that I did this on purpose with the loud shirt because it's hot here. And I'll apologize for the mess behind me because I just got back from travel. But other than that, I think folks, there's so much that's going to come from just the students arriving at our campus and what we're able to achieve between this, relationship between, the Vatican and Italy and the U.S. and Catholics in the United States and institutions in Italy, that, I don't want to say, here's what it's going to be. I just want all of us to watch it, right? And participate, because even though there's a finite number of us there on campus, we have a huge community of Catholics that have every right to reach out and say, ask a question, or find some way to participate with us. I think we have open arms for that, and I hope it's always the case.
That's amazing. Like we said when we started the conversation, Rigel and I are in love with what we've seen. We've been following the messaging on social media for the last number of months. Like I said, it makes me envious that I'm not in need of a science or technology degree currently. But people that are in my social circle, people that I love, potentially will be in. So I'm going to encourage them to follow along. For anyone that's listening, definitely check out the website. It's really well put together. There's tons of information on there. It's going to make you want to go and get a university degree. It's CatholicTech. And you can find the information there. And I love the caption too. It says, forming the next generation of saints, scholars, and scientists. That whoever came up with that, they're spot on. I think that's brilliant. Rigel, do you want to wrap us up in prayer here?
Absolutely. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord, we thank you for the intellect you have given us. With it, we have done everything from providing for the growing population to putting a man on the moon. Unraveling the mysteries of this universe that you've created will always be a joy to us, but we know that this intellect can be used for ill as well. So, Holy Spirit, we ask that you guide our minds and our hearts and orient them always towards God and His will, to what is right and what is true. We pray for everyone in the STEM field. Please give them the grace to recognize misguided decisions and the courage to stand up against them. We pray all this in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Awesome. Thank you, Rigel. As always, Dr. Kleck or Jeff, which do you prefer? I didn't ask you, so now I'm asking you right at the end.
Please.
Okay. Well, with your credentials,
people say Dr.
I don't know.
Kleck, I look for my father.
Okay. So, well, I apologize for not asking you at the outset. So, Jeff, thank you so much for coming, sharing this cool story about this fascinating new university. I wish you all the best of luck in the weeks ahead as you prepare for the first semester, and then thereafter all the exciting things. And we'll be following along eagerly. And who knows, maybe we can have you back next year or something to give us an update on the first year and what you've learned and stuff. I think that'd be really cool. But for now, thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, or one of your students even. That would be really cool.
Let's do that, right?
Yeah.
And it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. I love your program. And I look forward to spend more time with you in the future.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. We really appreciate it. To everyone who listened, thank you again for tuning in. This has been another episode of the Coffee, Commerce, and Catechesis podcast. We hope you'll tune back again sometime in the future. God bless you.
God bless.